multiverse is getting a little messy, and Marvel has a lot of movies, so I'm going to show you complete Marvel movie history. Yes! With every film history, I'm going to give whether or not you should watch this before Deadpool and Wolverine. Now, let's get to the beginning of our timeline. We've arrived in 1944, where the first theatrical Marvel movie came out. And what was it? Well, Captain America. And no, not Steve Rogers, Grant Gardner. A completely different Captain America than we've ever had before. And this might be the only notable thing from the movie, other than Captain America doesn't even have a shield here. These two things, not being Steve Rogers and not having a shield, might be pointed out by Deadpool in the movie just because it's the first ever theatrical release and the people behind Deadpool are going to know their history. But other than that, there's nothing important here and none of the characters will show up in Deadpool. But this is where we begin our journey on to the next part of our timeline. Now we land in 1986, where Howard the Duck came out. Yes, this is one of the most 80s movies you possibly can imagine. I mean, the duck literally kisses a woman. That's just weird. It's like the Planet of the Apes with Mark Wahlberg. It's just weird stuff going on. Deadpool might have just a blast mocking this one. What do you need to know about Howard the Duck? Well, it's a movie about a talking duck that's very sarcastic, and he's appeared in the Guardians of the Galaxy films, so that might be notable. I could see him actually being on the TVA screens. This is a very popular film to make fun of, so it actually does have some significance there, but other than that, this is an absolute must-not watch going into Deadpool and Wolverine, and yeah, there's not too much you need to know about this film. Now we're in 1998 with Blade, and this was Marvel's first major, if you will, blockbuster, and it kind of changed the superhero landscape because it showed that they could be more than just goofy kids films. It showed that you can take them serious and have serious actors playing these roles, and that's exactly what Wesley Snipes did. And speaking of Wesley Snipes, he's the main standout here. He's what makes this film. He's just an awesome vampire hunter, and yeah, I think that Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool is going to have some stuff to say in this movie about Wesley Snipes, considering he was in some of the Blade movies, the third one, and I think this is a movie that you don't have to watch before Deadpool and Wolverine, but if you want to, you could, and it was just really important for Marvel, and this is a big milestone in Marvel's history. Well. We're in 2000, and Marvel's first major blockbuster has come out. Yes, in the year 2000, X-Men came out, and it basically blew up the superhero world and started the entire landscape as we know it. Yes, Wesley Snipes and Blade gave us the first successful Marvel superhero movie. There's no doubt about that, but it was rated R, so a lot of people couldn't go see that. This was a PG-13 movie that was a huge commercial success, and it just completely changed the game for superhero movies. The CGI at the time, even though now it's dated, that's probably something Deadpool will make fun of. And the fact that Hugh Jackman says to Cyclops' character when he's Wolverine, he's like, oh, this is the best you got, and he's like, what, did you want yellow spandex suits? That's definitely getting brought up, I almost guarantee it. As you can tell, this is the first must-watch movie for going into Deadpool and Wolverine. But anyways, getting back to the importance, this movie just had a stellar cast. You casted Hugh Jackman, who the only debatable person in the superhero realm of a better casting is Robert Downey Jr. As Iron Man, you have Ian McKellen. As Magneto, Sir Patrick Stewart. As Charles Xavier, Halle Berry. As Storm. This is just an absolutely loaded cast, and it can't get much better than this. X-Men kind of set the bar for what superhero movies in the future would be, and it's a major player in the superhero world, and this is a must-watch before Deadpool and Wolverine. So let's go on to the timeline and see what we got next. I forgot to say another major part of the X-Men films were that in this movie, Kevin Feige got his start as a producer, which is just a major thing for superhero films to come. If you know, you know, but I'll talk about him later. In 2002, the superhero landscape changed forever. First, we got Blade 2, which Wesley Snipes finally returns as his vampire killing self, and he does great once again in this role. This is directed by Guillermo del Toro, and those are basically the only two notable things. Yes, there's a ton of great action scenes, but as far as this being referenced in Deadpool, it's the same as it goes for the first Blade. It's super intense action. He might reference Wesley Snipes just because Ryan Reynolds acted with him, but other than that, nothing too serious. But later in 2002, we got the absolute groundbreaking Spider-Man from Sam Raimi. We got Tobey Maguire here, Willem Dafoe, James Franco. Everyone here is just phenomenal, and Spider-Man truly changed cinema forever. The CGI in Spider-Man is something that people don't talk about often anymore because they forget about how good it was when it came out, but Spider-Man truly changed the way that superheroes and blockbusters looked at itself. It no longer required casting an A-list actor as your main role because we had Tobey Maguire here, and it's just a phenomenal oversight, and we've already gotten Spider-Man in a bunch of the multiverse stuff, so I wouldn't be surprised if maybe we get someone to show up here. It would be a little surprising. And even though both of these films came out this year, they're not must-watches for Deadpool 2, but the significance can definitely be felt for Spider-Man and Sam Raimi's vision of the character. And as we can see, he's going to continue this greatness, and Blade will continue as well throughout the early part of this decade. Now, let's go to the next part of our timeline. We've arrived in 2003 where 3 superhero movies were released this year. Now, the first one was Daredevil, which starred Ben Affleck and Jennifer Garner. Now, Ben Affleck, of course, was Daredevil, and Jennifer Garner was Elektra, who will get her own film later on in the Marvel movie history. Jon Favreau was also in this film, who would go on to direct Iron Man and start the MCU, which is a major notable part of this movie that might get mentioned in Deadpool. And Kingpin is also played by the wonderful Michael Clark Duncan, who, if you guys know, is from Green Mile, which is a really good movie. If you can go check that out, that would be awesome. Now, that doesn't have anything to do with Deadpool. It's just a good movie if you haven't seen it. Now, Deadpool might crack some jokes here about the film being dramatic, but other than that, this was just an average superhero movie, and it's definitely a not must-watch for Deadpool and Wolverine. Now, the second superhero movie released in 2003 was Hulk, and this one starred Eric Bana, and this is kind of the most notable part of the film. Other than the CGI, even though it looks a little outdated now, it was pretty good for back then, and a lot of people do have a lot of nostalgia for this Hulk, this Hulk has been rumored to appear in Deadpool and Wolverine, so this might pop up, so this could be a maybe watch for Deadpool and Wolverine. But other than that, there's nothing else really too notable about this film. And finally, in 2003, we have X2 X-Men United, which is a huge superhero film that got released this year. It set the gold standard once again for superhero movies and what they could do. Nightcrawler's cold open against the White House, his attack on the White House, is absolutely phenomenal. We get a lot of emotions in this movie with two sides getting pinned against each other, and we have Hugh Jackman and the phenomenal cast coming back. This is a must watch for Deadpool and Wolverine, and this is one that I would be on the lookout for getting referenced in Deadpool and Wolverine. Once again, in 2004, we get 3 superhero movies, and one of them here is one of my personal favorites and a lot of people's personal favorites. But first, we're going to stop at 2004's Punisher, where we finally get to see Frank Castle adapted to the big screen. Now, this movie wasn't met with too much of praise, but it's not a bad movie whatsoever. Thomas Jane is the one that brings Frank Castle to the role, and after his family is murdered, Castle becomes the Punisher. Basically, he goes on a one-man war crime, just destroying everything in his path, becoming basically some type of Terminator. Deadpool here might crack jokes at the Terminator being super gritty, like Wolverine will be in the film, so that is something that you could look for, and there's a new level of brutality brought here to Marvel cinema. Other than that, I'm going to say this is a not watch for Deadpool and Wolverine, but coming second in 2004, we have the phenomenal Spider-Man 2 that delves into Peter Parker as a person and sees how it affects him when he is Spider-Man. This is one of my personal favorites, and Dr. Octavius, Doc Ock, is a phenomenal villain. Kristen Dunst is also awesome here as Mary Jane Watson. James Franco gets a shining in, and we even get to see some of Willem Dafoe come back to haunt his son, Harry Osborn. Now, this movie, we have seen Tobey Maguire reprise his role in the multiverse in No Way Home, so not saying it's impossible, but I don't think that he would show up in Deadpool and Wolverine. Even though this is what became the gold standard at the time for superhero movies, I don't think this is a must-watch for Deadpool and Wolverine, but watch it if you enjoy good movies anyways. And finally, in 2004, we get to conclude the Blade trilogy, and this one is notable and probably will be mentioned and brought up with Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool because he played a character, Hannibal King, in Blade Trinity. Now, another thing that's notable in this film that Deadpool might make fun of is Wesley Snipes was notorious for just not wanting anything to do with anybody else on the cast or the directors, and he made this movie really hard to shoot. And other than that, this is not a must-watch for Deadpool and Wolverine at all, and it is the weakest of the Blade trilogy. So, let's go to the next part of our timeline. In 2005, we're back down to two superhero films. Now, the first one that came out this year was Elektra, and as many of you watching this video know, or maybe you don't know, Elektra is not considered very good, even though it has Jennifer Garner in it. She does the best she can with a bad script and a bad plot, and overall this is just one that you can miss. Deadpool maybe makes fun of this one, but I don't even know if it's worth making fun of, and it's just not one that you should watch before Deadpool and Wolverine. Now, the second superhero film of this year was 2005's Fantastic Four, and even though this isn't one of the best superhero films ever made, it's still not a bad entry. It gives us Marvel's first family. We have The Thing, Sue Storm, Reed Richards, Doctor Doom, Human Torch, all of those great people, but the most notable thing from this movie is Chris Evans as the Human Torch, who Chris Evans has gone on to say he wouldn't return to the MCU as Captain America, but he might return as the Human Torch, and the Human Torch is a character that has been rumored to be in Deadpool and Wolverine, so this one is a maybe watch going into Deadpool and Wolverine just because of the Chris Evans stuff and because Deadpool and Wolverine is supposed to be a multiversal film. So yeah, I would say this is a maybe watch, and let's get to the next part of our timeline. In 2006, we only have one superhero film from Marvel this year, and it's X-Men 3 The Last Stand. And X-Men 3 The Last Stand sees us going into the Dark Phoenix era of these films that will try to be replicated later because this first time it kind of failed. And no, it's not the worst superhero movie ever, but Jean Grey kills Cyclops right at the beginning, so that's just really, really weird. Then she also goes on to kill Charles Xavier, and some of these things should be really emotional, but they're not. Then at the end of the movie, Wolverine is forced to kill Jean Grey. I think that is going to get brought up by Deadpool and Wolverine. That part of the movie actually is a little emotional, but aside from that, we get introduced to Archangel here. We have Mystique losing her powers, which is kind of interesting, and then we also have a terrible Juggernaut that is fixed in Deadpool 2 that could be referenced in Deadpool and Wolverine. The Juggernaut might come back, so that is something that we can look forward to. And other than that, I would say this is a must watch for Deadpool and Wolverine. Yes, the quality might not be there, but this is going to have some influence onto what happens in the new upcoming film. So let's get to the next part of the timeline. In 2003, we're back to three superhero films this year, and the first one was Ghost Rider. Now, Ghost Rider has pretty much nothing notable about it other than Nicolas Cage plays the main character himself, and other than that, this is an absolute must-not watch for Deadpool and Wolverine. Maybe Ghost Rider gets referenced, but I'm not sure this movie has any significance to be in there. It was just released in 2007 and had Nicolas Cage in it, and he looks cool, I will give him that, and he rides a cool motorcycle. Now, next in 2007 we had Spider-Man 3, which is considered the weakest of the Raimi trilogy, but I still personally, and a lot of other people, have a fond spot in their heart for this film. Yes, it has a little too many villains, but that was orchestrated by Sony and not Raimi himself. But the important stuff in this movie is Harry Osborn ends up dying, and the symbiote is shown to be in this movie, and this is when the black suit happens, and the first time we get to see Venom, who will be appearing and is on my shirt right now. And one thing that's important about the symbiote is the symbiote was first brought up in Secret Wars, which is going to be one of the Avengers films in the future that deals with the multiverse. This film deals with the multiverse. Venom was just in the post-credit scene in No Way Home, leaving some symbiote stuff somewhere. Yes, I know the new trailer kind of throws a little shade into what direction it wants to go there, but anyways, it could be important, so maybe be on the lookout for the symbiote appearing somewhere in here just as an Easter egg. And the last film in 2007 was Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer, and Rise of the Silver Surfer has one really cool part, and that's the Silver Surfer himself. The CG is a little outdated, but he's still a super cool character. The Galactus in this movie is just a fart cloud, which is really annoying, and Chris Evans is Human Torch in this, so this is a maybe watch as well if you want to get more Human Torch just in case Chris Evans returns. But in order to see if he's going to return future on this timeline, we need to go forward in the timeline. In 2008, we're given 3 superhero films once again, and now to kick us off, we have Iron Man, and if you know anything about Iron Man, it's cinematic importance. And what do I mean by that? Well, I mean, after Iron Man came out and started the cinematic universe, everyone wanted to do this. Even though Iron Man is not the best superhero movie to come out in 2008, and that still belongs to The Dark Knight, which still holds the top gold standard for superhero movies, Iron Man was no scrub. It was a phenomenal movie with a perfect casting of Robert Downey Jr. and the leading role as Tony Stark. Jon Favreau, who I mentioned before in this timeline, is now directing here, and he plays Happy in this movie. Pepper Potts is a phenomenal character. Jeff Bridges is the villain in this one. It was a perfect start to what became the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and that is what Deadpool and Wolverine is joining now. And talk about joining the Marvel Cinematic Universe, this year we had the Incredible Hulk, and this one kind of is considered the black sheep of the MCU because it was not directly made by Marvel, it was made by Universal, and Edward Norton is the one that plays the Incredible Hulk here, but we do still have some of the characters like Secretary Ross, who is the same in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and the Iron Man, as Robert Downey Jr. appears in a post-credit scene. So it is connected, it just feels a little weird because the Hulk is recasted later, and I'll tell you about that later in the timeline. Don't want to mess anything up and cause any chem variants to come get me. But anyways, the final film that we had in 2008 that is a superhero movie was Punisher Warzone, and this is not a sequel to the 2004 Punisher, this is actually just a reboot, and other than that, there's really not too much to say about this film. The person that plays Punisher here is Ray Stevenson, and that's about it. As far as watching any of these movies for Deadpool and Wolverine, it is not a must, but Iron Man might be a maybe watch, just because it started the cinematic universe, and it's probably going to get referenced by Deadpool there. So, on to the next part of our timeline. In 2009, we have one Marvel superhero movie, and once again, it's an X-Men film with X-Men Origins Wolverine. Now, is this single superhero movie from Marvel in 2009 better than The Last Stand in quality? No, it's actually not, but I'm going to say this is a guaranteed watch before Deadpool and Wolverine, just because it is X-Men Origins Wolverine, and it has to do with Wolverine. But not only that, Ryan Reynolds gets his first start as Deadpool here, and it's one of the worst versions of a character you'll ever see, and it's already been referenced in Deadpool movies and by Ryan Reynolds himself. On top of that, Sabretooth also doesn't have his awesome character design that he had in the original X-Men. He's changed to look more like an actual person, which gets a thumbs down from me, and this character could appear in Deadpool and Wolverine. Other than that, that's about the only things that are notable other than the terrible quality. So, on to the next part of the timeline. In 2010, we once again just have one superhero movie from Marvel, and that is Iron Man 2. We get to see Robert Downey Jr. come back. Rhodey is recasted in this movie, which could be made as a joke in Deadpool and Wolverine. Jon Favreau once again is here to direct, and it's his final directorial accolade that he gets for the Marvel Cinematic Universe because he had some problems on them becoming formulaic, which could be made fun of by Deadpool as another joke in Deadpool and Wolverine. Now, other than that, Whiplash is a decent villain, but there's not too much that goes on in this film that's that much more notable other than Robert Downey Jr. being great like he always is. And this is a not watch for Deadpool and Wolverine. Let's get to the next part of our timeline. In 2011, there are 3 Marvel films that come out this year. First kicking us off is Thor, which has an amazing cast of Chris Hemsworth as Thor, Tom Hiddleston as Loki, Natalie Portman as Jane Foster, and Sir Anthony Hopkins as Odin. So yeah, Idris Elba is also Heimdall in this film. He's a great addition. So yeah, a really cool film. The tone is a little Shakespearean, but it's not a bad movie. It's a fish out of water story, and the most important thing here is actually Loki, which is kind of the case when Loki's in stuff. He's pretty important as he becomes a TVA variant of himself later, and that's how we kind of get introduced to some of the multiversal stuff, and he could appear in Deadpool and Wolverine. Then next in 2011, we have an X-Men film, another one that's a must watch, in First Class. Here we get to see the origins of the X-Men, and it's a pretty phenomenal film. We get to see a younger version of Magneto played by Michael Fassbender, and then we also get to see a younger version of Charles Xavier played by James McAvoy, and then a younger version of Mystique played by Jennifer Lawrence. The cast absolutely nails it here, and it's really cool to see their origins and what it was like before Magneto kind of became this gray villain character. Then the last film that we have in 2011 is Captain America: The First Avenger. This was a period piece where we get to see him during World War II before he gets his powers. It's an origin story. He falls in love with Peggy Carter. He has his best friend Bucky supposedly killed, which will come up later in the timeline. And the most notable part is Chris Evans, who is phenomenal as Captain America, and a lot of people want him to return. And he said he could return, but not as Captain America, but as the Human Torch. And the Human Torch could be in Deadpool and Wolverine. So this movie is a maybe watch. Thor is a maybe watch, and X-Men First Class is a must watch. So all of them, I would just go watch the movies from 2011 in our timeline, and let's see what 2012 has for us. In 2012, once again, we get 3 superhero films, and the first one kicking us off is Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance, and the only notable part about this movie that you need to know is that Nicolas Cage returns as Johnny Blaze to be the Ghost Rider. And that's about it. I don't think that Deadpool will even have any jokes for this one, just like the first one. They're both pretty mediocre. He might talk about Nicolas Cage being in the Marvel Universe, but that's about it. And this is a definite not watch for Deadpool and Wolverine. Now going forward in 2012, we have the Avengers, and oh boy, was this just an absolute monster of a film, just breaking all types of box office records. From this film was directed by Joss Whedon and produced by Kevin Feige, who I referenced earlier, got his start in producing with the X-Men franchise, so that was the important part there. And we just, for the first time, not for the first time because it did happen a while ago with the Universal monster movies, but for the first time in modern cinema, we had multiple movie franchises connected, and it worked. It worked on just astronomical levels. Loki is the villain here, so he might pop up here in his TVA version of himself. Yes, guys, I know there's a spoiler that I'll mention later because I'm not talking about shows in this, but there is a spoiler without Loki, but I still think there could be different versions of Loki left out there in the multiverse, and he could appear here, especially because the TVA has already been shown. But that's really the important stuff that happens in the Avengers. Nick Fury assembles Hulk, Thor, Black Widow, Hawkeye, Captain America, and Iron Man to give us our first Avengers. Just an awesome movie here, one of my all-time favorite superhero movies, and just one of the best ever, set a gold standard for how you do a cinematic universe. And the last superhero movie, which is a love of mine, is TASM, which is the Amazing Spider-Man. Spider-Man here is played by Andrew Garfield. We no longer have Tobey Maguire. The villain in this is the Lizard, and we get a phenomenal performance by Emma Stone as Gwen Stacy, who becomes a fan favorite. And I actually think that Emma Stone maybe could appear as Gwenpool and surprise some people in this movie. So all of these films here, I'm going to say, are not watch for Deadpool and Wolverine. If you wanted to watch the Avengers because Loki's in it, or to see Emma Stone for a chance of being Gwenpool, you can do that, but I'm going to say they're not watches for Deadpool and Wolverine. Now let's get to 2013 for our timeline. In 2013, we are once again given 3 films from Marvel, and the first one is from the MCU, and that is Iron Man 3, which this actually caps off Iron Man's trilogy very early for the MCU. And since you guys have made it this far into the video, I'm going to give you a hot take here, but this is my subjective favorite Iron Man film. I don't care about the Mandarin twist, which I do think could be referenced by Deadpool because there's a twist of being a fake out Mandarin. I don't care about that twist. I just have a really good time seeing Iron Man go back to his roots and having to use his brain to figure out how to solve problems without his suits. And yes, I know the suits, he's earned the right to use them, but that's just my personal opinion. There's not too much that happens in this film that I think could be referenced in Deadpool and Wolverine, just other than the Mandarin fake out. Maybe there's a fake villain in there that they reference that, but other than that, this is a not watch for Deadpool and Wolverine. The next one up is the Wolverine, which is a must watch because it's another, not origin story, but it's in Wolverine's individual trilogy of movies. This is a solid film. It has a lot of Japanese lore here, which I think is really cool. It has a love interest for Wolverine that's not Jean Grey, so that's also awesome. And the nuke scene in this movie is just one of the coolest superhero scenes in general, so I would say this is a must watch for Deadpool and Wolverine, and it will probably be referenced in Deadpool and Wolverine. Just some of this movie most likely will. And the final film from Marvel that we got in 2013 was Thor: The Dark World, and this is usually considered, this or Iron Man 2 is considered the worst movie in the Infinity Saga, but that does not mean they're bad. This is still a solid film, and we get Loki in here, and honestly, I think this is Tom Hiddleston's best performance as Loki throughout the entire MCU. He's an absolute standout here, and that might give you reason to watch this before Deadpool and Wolverine, but I'm going to say this is a not watch. You can watch it if you want to, just in case Loki pops up in Deadpool and Wolverine. And other than that, we get Malekith as a dark elf. He was a terrible villain. We still have the same phenomenal cast from before. Heimdall gets an awesome scene for himself, and Thor's mom does die, which has impact on him later, but I'm going to still say it's a not watch for Deadpool and Wolverine. Now, let's get to the next year of our timeline. We've made it to 2014, which a lot of people consider the golden year for superhero movies ever, and I am in that camp for sure. To kick things off, we have Captain America: The Winter Soldier, which is considered one of the best superhero films ever, just by a lot of people. A lot of critics say this, and for good reason, because it really changed the MCU and what types of tones and stories could be told in it. It was very formulaic for a little while going into this movie, but then we got here and we just got a complete switch flipped, and this is because we were taken more into an actual character-driven drama. Not that other character studies hadn't been shown, like Iron Man 3, we get to see some form of PTSD because of the Avengers movie and the effects on Tony, but in this movie we really go into a spy thriller, a political thriller with Captain America, and it changed people's minds about Chris Evans, because I think a lot of people in the Avengers, looking back on it, you have fond memories of Captain America because of everything that came after that. But starting off, Captain America was not the strongest character in the Avengers crew. You probably like Thor and Iron Man a little bit better because that's what they were set up to be, but when this movie comes out, you can't help but fall in love with Captain America, and it's completely flipped on its head. The MCU is when it's revealed that S.H.I.E.L.D. has been infiltrated by Hydra, and the one that's been spearheading all of their attacks is none other than Bucky Barnes, the Winter Soldier. This shocks Captain America, and this changes things for the entirety of the MCU going forward. It has major consequences. We also get amazing character introductions for Sam Wilson, as who will become the next Captain America after Steve Rogers is done. So we get him there. We also have Black Widow in this film, who Scarlett Johansson is phenomenal. This is also the coolest Nick Fury ever is in the entire MCU. Samuel L. Jackson just puts in one crazy performance. The villains here are great, the story is great, and it has one of the best superhero moments when Captain America does the most heroic thing he can by, instead of killing Bucky, he lets Bucky beat the crap out of him and does what a hero would do and saves his friend, and that breaks through to Bucky, and Bucky ends up saving him. Then next in this year of great superhero films, we have The Amazing Spider-Man 2. This movie is considered one of the weaker Spider-Man movies, but none of the Spider-Man movies are bad. Andrew Garfield is back once again, and this movie is very infamous for the Green Goblin killing Emma Stone's Gwen Stacy, which is probably the most infamous superhero movie death of all time. Yes, there's one other one, I don't want to spoil it because I'll talk about it later in the video, but this one probably is the most emotional just because we have two Oscar-worthy actors and actresses acting in this with Emma Stone and Andrew Garfield. We also get a really cool Electro here. Yes, he doesn't look like the comics Electro, but the theme song for him is awesome. And this is overall a pretty decent film, but you don't have to watch it for Deadpool and Wolverine. Same for Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Even though it's awesome, you do not have to watch this movie whatsoever for Deadpool and Wolverine. But the next film in 2014 is an absolute must-watch, one of my personal favorite superhero movies as well. Like I said, this year is just insane with X-Men: Days of Future Past. A lot of people consider this the best X-Men movie other than one other in the future. It has to do with an old man Logan, if you know what I'm talking about, but this one is an absolute phenomenal film. It combines the original X-Men cast and the new X-Men cast with just this awesome sci-fi time travel epic with the Sentinels as the villains. Everyone here is awesome. We have both the casts it's just so overloaded, it's insane. Wolverine is at his best in this movie, and this is definitely a movie that will be referenced in Deadpool and Wolverine. This is probably one of the top ones you can watch. Yes, you need to watch some other films before watching this one, but this is a must watch if you're a Deadpool and Wolverine fan. And in 2014, we also had what was basically a lot of people said with the Winter Soldier and Guardians of the Galaxy gave a lot of faith to the MCU because they went away from its formulaic roots. We have Guardians of the Galaxy, which is probably the most surprising superhero movie of all time. It took the world by storm. We took a list of C-list characters and we made them the A-list. It's because of a phenomenal cast with Zoe Saldana as Gamora, Drax is played by David Bautista, we have Bradley Cooper as Rocket, Vin Diesel as Groot, and then Chris Pratt as Star-Lord, and this is just one of the funniest MCU movies. It's phenomenal, it's heartfelt, It's awesome, but it's not a must-watch for Deadpool and Wolverine. It's probably a not-watch, but if you love superhero movies or just good movies, go watch Guardians of the Galaxy. And finally, this one's going to be weird, not going to talk about a lot. Big Hero 6 was released, and yes, it's a Marvel property. It's a pretty solid film, and yes, I know I've ignored other Marvel properties like The Kingsman and Men in Black, but this one I feel is a superhero movie through and through, and I'm just going to reference it here. No way this gets referenced by Deadpool in Deadpool and Wolverine. So, on to the next part of our timeline. Now we are in 2015, where we get to see a second Avengers movie here in Avengers Age of Ultron. We get a pretty good villain in Ultron, but the main thing that this movie does is it takes some of the Hydra stuff that was introduced to us in the Winter Soldier and just pushes it forward. If you don't remember, the Hydra agents are the ones that make Quicksilver and they make Scarlet Witch, and this movie also shows us a little bit of the divide within the Avengers. It sprinkles that stuff in that will be important later between Iron Man and Captain America and their trust within each other. And then in 2015, we also get Ant-Man, which was a breath of fresh air. Yes, it's not one of the most groundbreaking superhero movies ever, but Paul Rudd does an amazing job as Scott Lang in becoming Ant-Man, and the original Ant-Man, Hank Pym himself, is played by Michael Douglas, so we got a good cast here. Yellow Jacket actually will come up later down the line in some of the MCU stuff, so I say this is a solid film, but neither Avengers or Ant-Man are a must-watch for Deadpool. They're probably a not-watch, but they're both enjoyable. Now, what's an absolute must-not-watch is Fantasic that came out in 2015. This movie is just awful. It's almost not worth talking about. The plot, like there's almost nothing here to talk about because none of it is interesting. Even Miles Teller and Michael B. Jordan couldn't save this film from being terrible. So let's get away from that nasty, icky stuff that's an absolute must not watch and will probably be made fun by Deadpool and Wolverine. Let's just get away from it and go to the next year in our timeline. In 2016, we're hit with 4 Marvel superhero movies here, and the first one of which is a phenomenal one and caught the world by storm, and that is Deadpool. And the reason that I'm making this video is because of Deadpool and Wolverine, and it has to do with Deadpool being such a huge success. Now, this was the first superhero movie that really took the humor to the next level. It's rated R, and it's for good reason. This movie does very much rated R comedy, rated R action, but the world couldn't have needed it more at this time with the superhero landscape, and it was just a breath of fresh air at the time. Ryan Reynolds finally gets to give a good adaptation of Deadpool, and this movie will most likely be referenced, but I don't even know if that needs to go without saying or with saying, whichever one. At this point, you know, I'm like 100 minutes in to just saying stuff, but that's what the timeline will do to you. Anyways, the next movie of the year that Marvel brought was Captain America Civil War, and this was a bombshell. People call it Avengers 2.5, and that's because we basically have almost all the Avengers in it. We have Iron Man versus Captain America because Baron Zemo frames Bucky for a crime he did not commit. Then the Soviet Accords are put on the line, and it really puts 2 different ideologies for Captain America and Iron Man to go up against each other. People are choosing sides. We have the revelation that was hinted by in the Winter Soldier. I didn't talk about it just because if I said something, it might spoil some stuff, but that the Winter Soldier ended up killing Iron Man's parents, and that's why they died. It was not a car crash, and it was actually a cover-up. And the entire time, well, not the entire time, since the Winter Soldier, Captain America actually knew that was what the heartbreak was. In this movie, we also get an amazing introduction to Black Panther and Spider-Man by Tom Holland, and Chadwick Boseman plays Black Panther. Rest in peace, Chadwick Boseman. You were phenomenal, and just the world really misses you right now. And then in 2016, we have my least favorite X-Men movie. Yes, I know it's not technically objectively the worst, but X-Men Apocalypse was so dang bad that you had Oscar Isaac just give an absolute bloodbath of a performance as Apocalypse. Like, I mean, this guy was supposed to be a Thanos level threat, and he just didn't feel like anything. It felt like Magneto once again was kind of the real villain, and he just lacked a lot of substance here. There's really no build up. The CGI might be made fun of by Deadpool, and this movie could be made fun by Deadpool a lot. in Deadpool and Wolverine, and the final movie that we have from 2016 was Doctor Strange, which kind of hinted at stuff of the multiverse of the future. Benedict Cumberbatch does an amazing job as Doctor Strange here. We get introduced to the Chosen One, who I thought was in the trailer of Deadpool and Wolverine, but I think that's actually Cassandra Nova, who might be a villain. And anyways, I just don't think that you need to watch Doctor Strange to get the full experience of Deadpool and Wolverine, but it was an awesome thing in Marvel to get to see the Time Stone, to get to see it being used and explain how magic works in the MCU. And other than that, the only films that are a must-watch in this piece of time is Deadpool and Captain America Civil War. Great film, I recommend going to watch it, but it's not a must-watch. And X-Men Apocalypse is a maybe watch because it is an X-Men movie, but Deadpool and Wolverine aren't in it. Yes, I know Wolverine has a brief cameo. All you keyboard warriors down there, don't hate me. I'm just saying he's not really in this movie. So going on forward in our timeline. We are now to 2017, and we have 4 Marvel movies that were released this year. So the first one that we had is probably what is the gold standard, along with the Dark Knight. As of right now, there's nothing that's topped these two. You'd probably still say the Dark Knight. I know that's not Marvel, but it just has to be said in this video. But Logan came out in 2017, and it really changed the superhero genre into being able to focus just on a character-driven story. It didn't have to be anything crazy or any epic scale. It was just a phenomenal movie focusing on Hugh Jackman's Wolverine and the ending to his career. It focused heavily on the Western side of things and took a lot of influence from John Wayne and those type of actors. And at the end of the day, this is one of the best superhero films ever made. X-23 was a great character. We get to see the end to Wolverine, which is something that I didn't think would happen. I thought they would keep going, but they ended it. And what do you know, later we have Deadpool and Wolverine, so this is a must watch before Deadpool and Wolverine. I really don't think there's going to be anything made fun of in here. Maybe just the fact that you thought Wolverine was dead and he's coming back, but other than that, this is an absolute must watch. Now, the second superhero film from Marvel this year was Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Here's another hot take for you that have made it to the end of the video, but this is not one of my favorites. I do think it has phenomenal moments. Yondu's death is probably what I think is the most emotional death in any superhero movie at all. It just really connected with me, of that, like having a father figure like that was just really, really sad. I think there's a great moment when, like really emotional moment when Star-Lord confronts Ego, who is played by Kurt Russell, phenomenal actor, just about Ego is the one that put the tumor in Star-Lord's mom. That's just crazy villainy stuff. I mean, that's top tier villainy. But other than that, there's a lot of goofy decisions. The jokes kind of feel forced here, and it's not as funny as the other two Guardians films, and I just don't think it works as much. But now there's some setup for later films. But in general, I think Deadpool and Wolverine and Deadpool might make fun of this film just for its goofy tone and not being as good as the other two, but I don't think that's highly likely, and this is a must not watch for Deadpool and Wolverine. Now, the next superhero film that came out in 2017 was once again another Spider-Man film with another Spider-Man actor. We have Tom Holland's Spider-Man and Spider-Man Homecoming. Now, like I said, with all the other Spider-Man, maybe they show up here just because Spider-Man is heavily attached to the multiverse, but I really think that's highly unlikely. Tony Stark is in this movie more than what I would call a cameo, but it's not necessarily a huge role. He does have some impact on the plot. Michael Keaton plays a great villain here with the Vulture, and of course Zendaya is MJ. So that's all you need to know really for Spider-Man Homecoming. I don't think there's going to be any jokes made about this in Deadpool and Wolverine, and this is a must not watch. Really, there's nothing important that happens in here that you need to watch. And finally, in 2017, we have Thor Ragnarok, which I'm pretty sure everyone can say objectively is the best Thor movie. It was really fresh when it came out. Taika Waititi, the director, just had a really fresh vision on where to take the character. This is probably my favorite Stan Lee cameo, and all of them, I like him being the haircut dresser. I thought that was a funny joke. I like the switch up of Thor's just entire persona. Getting the haircut kind of symbolized a new era for Thor. He learned how to be by himself. Odin dies in this movie. Hela's an awesome villain. Surtur at the end, it's really cool when he grows and Thor realizes he has to beat Asgard. And then of course there's Loki, so this is a maybe watch once again, just because Loki's presence in this movie is important and he's an important character in the multiverse. So yeah, overall 2017 was a very solid year for Marvel, but let's get to 2018, where I think the best superhero movie ever made was made in this year. Boom! We've arrived in 2018, and yes, I promise what I think the best superhero movie ever made is in this year and was brought to us by Marvel. Now, starting 2018 off right is Black Panther. Black Panther's cultural significance cannot be understated. It was the first time we really got the proper treatment of a black character in Marvel. Yes, I know there was Blade, but it had been just decades until we actually got another black superhero, and this is exactly what the world needed at the time. And Chadwick Boseman was perfect in this role, and once again, rest in peace, Chadwick Boseman. I always will remember you as Jackie Robinson in 42, just a really phenomenal film, and you're a great actor. This film also just brought amazing musicians to the forefront. A ton of songs in this movie people don't even realize are from this movie, by Kendrick Lamar and The Weeknd, which are two of my favorite artists in general, so the soundtrack here is absolutely phenomenal. Then you also have a phenomenal cast, like I said, Chadwick Boseman, but you get Michael B. Jordan as an awesome Killmonger here. And then you also have Ulysses S. Claw, who is played by the guy that plays Gollum in Lord of the Rings. I can't remember his name. I should have wrote it down in my notes, but I can't. He's a phenomenal actor. He also plays Caesar. He's also Snoke in Star Wars. Just a really good actor there. I don't know why I can't remember his name, but he first appeared in Avengers Age of Ultron. But this movie, its cultural impact is just phenomenal, and it's a really good superhero movie, and it was a huge win for Marvel, but it is not a must-watch for Deadpool and Wolverine. I really don't think that Deadpool and Wolverine, I don't think Deadpool will have any jokes for this movie just because of the Chadwick Boseman situation. That is something that he really doesn't need, like there needs to be nothing about that. But in 2018, what I think the best superhero movie ever made is Avengers Infinity War. This film was the pinnacle of all the MCU. There was a lot of stuff that was writing on this movie that if it did not work, if Thanos had been hyped up for this long and he was a bad villain, the entire MCU would have felt pointless. It would have been Game of Thrones, like at the end of Game of Thrones when the last season you're like, I went through all of that, it was good, but you just have that bad taste in your mouth, and that's what you're going to remember, that aftertaste, and that is not what happened. Thanos is one of the best movie villains of all time. Then we have just multiple storylines going on at the same time, and none of it feels rushed. It actually really fits well into the story and just goes together seamlessly. We had the first time the Guardians meet some of our other heroes, and that just goes extremely well. The introduction of Thanos into the MCU as a proper villain and not just a cameo, and Guardians of the Galaxy was just awesome. They changed his background from impressing Lady Death in the comics to wanting to basically end world hunger, and so he does that in the most insane way, but it makes him a little bit more nuanced. Deadpool might joke about the insane amount of characters in this movie, but I really don't think that that's going to happen. Maybe he'll call it some type of Infinity War for himself and Deadpool and Wolverine. I don't know, but also it just goes to show you that the Russo brothers are the best directors that have been in the MCU. They've done Civil War and Winter Soldier up to this point, and now they've done Infinity War, and they always talked about making their Empire Strikes Back, and I have to say that's exactly what they did. And the cliffhanger, for those who didn't read the comics, I'm sure was just absolutely insane. Then in this year of 2018, we got Deadpool 2, and in this movie, we finally got a fixed Juggernaut. We got Cable, who was played by Josh Brolin, who played Thanos, so that's interesting. And going back to Thanos real quick, that movie, Infinity War, is an absolute must-watch for any superhero fan, but you have to do a lot of homework, so it's not really a must-watch for Deadpool and Wolverine, unfortunately, but it is a great movie, and I highly recommend to go check that out. Anyways, getting back to Deadpool 2, it gives you more of what you love. It shows the X-Force, and it's also a phenomenal superhero movie, and Deadpool 2 is a must-watch before Deadpool and Wolverine. That movie's going to connect to Deadpool and Wolverine, so there's definitely going to be some jokes in there. In 2018, we also got Ant-Man and the Wasp, and we get the Wasp being more of, instead of a side character, she's kind of at the forefront of this movie along with Scott. This movie deals with the events of Civil War and how Scott is on house arrest for helping out Captain America, as we see those Captain America movies still having influence to the MCU at this point in the timeline. And this is a pretty lighthearted movie, and I would say this is a good one for a family to watch. There's not too much drama that can upset a child or anything like that, so that's good for this movie. And I would say this is a must not watch for Deadpool and Wolverine. Nothing really happens. In the after credit scene here, we see everyone snapped away from the Infinity War events as well, so it connects back there. Then we get our Venom movie in 2018, and the only notable part about Venom is that he kind of goes into the multiverse because his characters appear in Across the Spider-Verse, and then he was also in No Way Home, and he's played by the phenomenal Tom Hardy, who just acts both the Venom voice and Eddie Brock. He's just phenomenal in this movie, but other than that, the story is just a little lackluster, and it's more like a B movie, but I would still recommend it. This is a not must watch, though, for Deadpool and Wolverine. Now coming to the final superhero movie of 2018, which a lot of people could say this is the best of all time. We get Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which really gives us our first big, heavily focused Marvel cartoon animated movie. And what better character than to do this with other than Miles Morales' Spider-Man. He's super lovable. He's going across dimensions. We get to see Peter B. Parker, who takes a lot of influence from Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. We just get to see the meta takes on Spider-Man, see a bunch of different versions of characters we love, like Doc Ock, and all of those things. We get a Kingpin in this movie. It's a phenomenal movie that deals with the multiverse and sets stuff up later. Maybe something about this will be referenced in Deadpool and Wolverine, but I think they're going to let Sony make the call on that. So this is a maybe watch for Deadpool and Wolverine. And with 2018 out of the way and the best superhero film ever made, let's get straight into 2019. And we're in 2019, and we have 4 superhero films from Marvel this year, and the first one is actually called Captain Marvel, which probably confuses a lot of people because they're like, oh, that's what Marvel's named after. It's not really, but her name is Captain Marvel. And talking about cultural impact, as we were for Black Panther last year, we have to talk about the cultural impact here for Captain Marvel. Carol Danvers, the first female-led superhero movie in the MCU, finally arrives. Long overdue here. I don't know how it took that long. Black Widow, Scarlett Johansson should have gotten a superhero flick a long time ago. We also have a good cast here where we have Jude Law playing the villain. Here he does phenomenal, just like he does in everything else. But the main thing about this movie is it got a lot of mixed fan reviews, and it's mostly because of the actress playing this movie, Brie Larson. She has a very bad chemistry with a lot of the Avengers cast, and it just looks super weird. And if I was to guess, that's what's going to be brought up by Deadpool, is something weird with Brie Larson off the screen, because on the screen, I don't think there's really anything to complain about. Captain Marvel is a solid movie. Yes, is it MCU formulaic? Absolutely, but it's not bad in any way at all. And Brie Larson's not even a bad actress. It's just that she has some off-the-screen problems. But getting away from those off-the-screen problems, it's not really an absolute must-watch for Deadpool and Wolverine. It's actually a must-not watch. There's really no reason to watch it. It won't have that much significant impact unless you're talking about a post-credit scene from the Marvels, which I'll talk about later, but I'll let you decide if you want to watch this one. So then we have a maybe watch, but you would have to do a lot of homework if you maybe watched it. But this is what a lot of people would say is the best superhero film of all time, or one of them. I'm in the other camp for Infinity War, but of course in 2019 we had Endgame, the highest grossing movie of all time. And yes, I know that Avatar technically re-released and beat it, but for its single release, Endgame is the highest grossing movie of all time. What do you need to know? Well, the Avengers at the beginning of the movie, dealing with everybody being snapped away, they decide to kill Thanos. That has a whole trickling effect where they don't know what to do. It goes 5 years into the future. Then we have to go back in the timeline to get the stones, and then we get the stones and we bring everybody back. And by everybody, I mean like 18 movies worth of characters back, probably more than that. And so there's a lot that goes on in Endgame. It can't even be summed up here. A lot of these movies can't, but Endgame is one of the best superhero movies of all time. It has one of the best endings of all time. It pays homage to the first Iron Man at the ending when he says, "I am Iron Man," which a lot of people would say is the best superhero death in all of cinema, which I probably can't disagree with. I would have my arguments, but it definitely is top of the tiers. And then from there, you also have the Russo brothers giving their final directorial presence in the MCU. As of right now, there's rumors they're coming on to Secret Wars, so this video will be very important if Secret Wars comes, that you guys watch that in the future just to get a recap. So save it somewhere down below into a playlist, just so in a couple years when Secret Wars is coming out, you have this recap again. But anyways, basically they beat up on Thanos, that everything goes right. It's the Return of the King ending for the Avengers cast and crew. Of course, in this movie, Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans are supposedly gone, but a lot of people are trying to get them back. It's just a phenomenal movie. Enough can't be said about that. And this is a maybe watch for Deadpool and Wolverine. And maybe, I think, Deadpool might make up a joke just because I've seen some of the circles spinning in the Deadpool and Wolverine trailer, so that maybe they pop up in Endgame. Who knows? They can pop up all over the place. But we'll move on from Endgame, which is very hard to do. It could have ended there for the MCU. Of course, Marvel's not just the MCU, but it continued with Spider-Man Far From Home, and we have Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio, which is a huge actor playing a great villain here. I know this gets mixed reviews, but Mysterio is super cool. The visuals in this movie are awesome. Zendaya as MJ ends up getting with Spider-Man in this movie. It's nice to get a change of scenery where Spider-Man's not in New York anymore. And like I said with all Spider-Man, he could appear in this movie just because he's so tied into the Spider-Verse and the Multiverse, but I don't think that's likely. This is a maybe watch just if you're interested in the Spider-Man Spider-Verse stuff. And Deadpool might make fun of this movie for catching a little flack on him relying too much on the Edith glasses from Tony Stark that were left to him after Endgame in the post-Endgame world. Now, the last film from Marvel that we had this year was what I mentioned before with X-Men The Last Stand, is the second attempt at the Dark Phoenix saga, and this attempt doesn't go any better. It lacks a lot of emotional beats. It's not really a great movie, and I think this is one you definitely can skip, even though it's an X-Men film, and it's a not watch for Deadpool and Wolverine, and he'll probably make fun of it in Deadpool and Wolverine at some point. So let's move on to 2020, the COVID year. In 2020, the only Marvel superhero movie that was released, mostly because it was COVID, was the New Mutants, and literally the only thing I gotta say here is this is an X-Men movie. It's not a must-watch at all. The quality is not very good. It doesn't even have anything to do with most of the main continuity of the X-Men universe, and the only thing that I can really give it praise for is trying to switch up some of the superhero genre by going into horror, but even then, it didn't do anything that well. So let's just jump through this icky period and get to the next part of our timeline. In 2021, Black Widow finally got her film debut with a film called Black Widow. And yes, Scarlett Johansson came back even though she was killed off in Endgame, and inevitably some of the hype for this movie was gone, especially since it was supposed to come out in 2020, but then COVID happened. This film is about as mediocre as you can get for a Marvel film, especially for the MCU. People had such high expectations, especially since Black Widow and Scarlett Johansson were two of the fan favorites. I mean, they're the same person, technically, but you get what I mean. Anyways, this movie saw Taskmaster, and for some reason, it was a very weird version of the Taskmaster that no one really cared about, and we got to see her Black Widow agency and how she grew up, but it was not enough, and it was too little too late, and this film could get made fun of for the remarkably bad CGI in the third act by Deadpool and Wolverine, and I don't think this is a must-watch for Deadpool and Wolverine. You probably can skip out on this one. Now, the second film that came out in 2021 was Shang-Chi and the Legend of Ten Rings, and I really think this is Marvel's only true success since the Infinity Saga has concluded. Yes, I know there's No Way Home that comes out later this year, and I know there's Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, but Volume 3 I think is a James Gunn product and not an MCU product, and No Way Home project was from Sony and a Spider-Verse culmination and not an MCU thing, but I do think Shang-Chi showed a lot of the right steps for the MCU going forward and how they should do their movies. Now, some of the formulaic MCU stuff kind of got in its own way, but other than that, I think it's a solid outing for Shang-Chi. It had a lot of great martial arts in this. There was a real Mandarin that wasn't the fake one from Iron Man 3, and I think this is a good film, but it's not a must-watch for Deadpool, and you probably can skip out on this one. Then there's Venom Let There Be Carnage, and other than Woody Harrelson joining the cast as Carnage, and it being a very watered-down version of Carnage, there's not too much that you need to know from this film. And moving on, in 2021, we had The Eternals, and The Eternals broke the streak for Marvel having a positive score on Rotten Tomatoes. Yes, Rotten Tomatoes isn't the end-all be-all, and by Marvel I mean the MCU. The first MCU film to be rotten, and I'm pretty sure Deadpool will bring that up in this movie because The Eternals was a big project that got a lot of money that did not do well. There's a lot of plot threads just leaking about we literally have an Eternal in the middle of the ocean somewhere frozen. I bet Deadpool brings that up in this movie. This movie's an absolute must not watch unless you want to see what the MCU is doing wrong. Now, the final movie that came out in 2021 that blew people's mind was Spider-Man No Way Home, and this movie is how you do the multiverse right. Marvel's been trying to do it, the MCU has been trying to do it for a while. Into the Spider-Verse showed how to do it in the cartoon setting. No Way Home showed how to do it in the live action setting, bringing back Tobey and Andrew, Willem Dafoe, and all the other cast and crew. It was absolutely phenomenal. This was a good movie, it was a great experience. I call this an event film at its finest, and this is a maybe watch for Deadpool and Wolverine, considering it shows you what a multiverse should be like, and Spider-Man, or one of the versions of Spider-Man, could pull up in Deadpool and Wolverine. In 2022, we got 4 Marvel movies here, and the quality was a little lacking all around from Marvel this year, but that's not the end-all be-all. We are only looking towards the future of the timeline from here on out, because we know Deadpool and Wolverine will fix a lot of these problems. Now, the first movie that came out was Morbius, and this movie is just an absolute meme at this point. Even though it made $1 billion, it still couldn't win the hearts of many. I don't know why. Jared Leto was just awesome. He's the best actor ever, and yeah, Deadpool's gonna have a field day mocking this one, and especially since it's connected to the multiverse with Michael Keaton's Vulture being in the post-credit scene. It just is not, it's not worth watching. Don't watch this unless you just want to see the best movie ever, then you can watch it. Other than that, the next movie that came out that promised the multiverse and didn't deliver was Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. This is my least favorite MCU movie. I just think this movie fails on all levels, and I was really excited because Sam Raimi was supposed to direct some of the Avengers movies. He directed the Amazing Spider-Man trilogy with Tobey Maguire, and for whatever reason here, the Multiverse of Madness, it doesn't go well. Elizabeth Olsen, Scarlet Witch is just undercooked here. Yes, I know she had her own show, and that's not something that I've mentioned before with the rest of this timeline since it's the movies, but she did have her WandaVision show. That was a decent show and decent outing, but it teased us a little bit with having the X-Men come in, with having a fake Quicksilver, but that's getting into the show. I'm going to stick with the movie here. Her character was not developed enough to be a full-on villain, and it just felt really weird, and they promised a multiverse, and they gave us the most Walmart watered-down version of the multiverse. It's basically like saying, oh, everything's a different color. How crazy is that? When you could have given us anything. It's like the What If show. Like, everything there is just watered down. And yeah, as you can see, I do not like this film. This is a maybe watch because it talks about the multiverse but doesn't deliver. So maybe watch it at your own risk, honestly. And then following up in 2022, we had Thor: Love and Thunder, and this movie catches a lot of hate for just being over the top with the comedic relief, and I tend to agree on that. Even though I don't think this film is terrible, I don't think it's very good. You wasted Christian Bale as an actor playing Gore, and Gore looks nothing like he does in the comic book, so that already brings you a step down. And the story, I really feel like we undermined Thor's character here in the MCU as its entirety, but Chris Hemsworth has said he wants to return, so we can look towards the future for the Thor franchise. And then the only superhero film 2022 that I think is actually good is Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. It had the impossible task of replacing Chadwick Boseman as the Black Panther, and Letitia Wright did the best job that she could. We also get Namor in here, which is a huge reference to the X-Men and mutants in the MCU, because Namor in the comics is a mutant. So that is probably the biggest connection that you can make here. As far as these movies being a must-watch for Deadpool and Wolverine, none of them are, but you can watch them if you want to. Now, moving on to 2023. In 2024, we have 4 Marvel movies once again. As you can see, a lot of the years have had 4 or 3 movies. That's kind of the consistent pattern for Marvel and the release schedule. But to kick things off, we had Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and this movie was a huge letdown. We had Michelle Pfeiffer, Michael Douglas, and Paul Rudd here all at the helm, and it still couldn't deliver. Of course, the Jonathan Majors King thing makes things weird, but you have to separate the art from the artist. Anyways, the King in this movie is what really just upsets a lot of people. How do you have Ant-Man beating what's supposed to be your next Thanos, your next future big bad of the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Doesn't make any sense. Yes, I know King has a strength in numbers, but this one was King the Conqueror that he beat, so you completely undermine the villain of the future, and that just doesn't sit well with people. You also have a weird actress change for Cassidy Lang for the future Wasp, and that's also very weird. And then the only other notable thing here is that you have Yellow Jacket coming back as MODOK, which is really, really weird. The CGI there is terrible, and this is something Deadpool will most likely make fun of. And Deadpool and Wolverine, is this movie a must watch? Probably not. It's a maybe, because Deadpool will probably make fun and try to correct some of the King stuff and the multiverse stuff in this film. And then the next movie we had that came out was Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and I don't consider this an MCU project at all. I consider this a James Gunn sending off. So everything that happens in this movie I don't really feel like is connected to the multiverse stuff of the MCU. Yes, we have a different Gamora that comes out, so there's kind of stuff there, but other than that, I mean, Chris Pratt's gone, David Bautista's gone. We have a lot of their characters, you know, just leaving the roles here because they were connected to James Gunn and not the MCU. So this is a great movie, but it's a definite not watch for Deadpool and Wolverine. But as far as Marvel goes, it introduces Adam Warlock. The High Evolutionary is a phenomenal villain. It's a good movie, but I just don't think it's too entirely concerned with being an MCU film, especially because it's the first MCU and Disney movie to drop the F word. Anyways, next we have one of the best superhero films ever made with Across the Spider-Verse. It took the ante from Into the Spider-Verse, just upped it to a whole new level. Gwen Stacy by Haley Steinfeld here is just awesome. The soundtrack is awesome. The twists and turns are awesome, and Miles being the first anomaly might be something that we see throughout the multiverse. I could see them actually trying to make the cartoons become part of the MCU's multiverse and the entire multiverse. This could be one that you need to watch out for, and I'm going to put that on the maybe watch list, especially since Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man were showed in here, and so was Venom, so they've already connected to some of the live action stuff here. Now, the last movie that came out this year was The Marvels with Brie Larson coming back. This movie did not do well financially, it didn't do well commercially, it didn't do well critically, but it's not a terrible movie. It had some good action here. I do like the change of the formulaic Marvel plotline. They tried to tell a different story, but it's very goofy with the power switching thing. Miss Marvel is brought in here from her show, but that is a show thing, not a movie thing, so you can say her movie introduction is here. And Monica Rambeau is back from WandaVision, now also a show, so she kind of makes her movie debut here, even though technically she doesn't, because she was a little girl in Captain Marvel. But the most important thing here is the X-Men are in the post-credit scene when Monica Rambeau goes to the different universe, so that will probably be connected to Deadpool and Wolverine. Are any of these a must-watch? No, but I'd say all of them, besides Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, are a maybe watch. So let's get to the final year of our timeline right before Deadpool and Wolverine. And in 2024, the only superhero movie we have from Marvel is Madam Web, which is notoriously known as one of the worst superhero films ever made. And even Dakota Johnson, the main actress herself, blames the fans for it being bad, even though it's a piece of garbage. It was also promising a lot of multiversal stuff and gave us nothing. I don't understand in Morbius, when you have Michael Keaton's Vulture pop up there, you couldn't bring anything in like that. I don't know if Marvel want to give them the deal or what, but it's just not a good movie. And this movie is exactly why we need Deadpool and Wolverine to save us. So that was the complete Marvel history of every single Marvel movie that has ever been made. Yes, it wasn't in depth in all of them, but it was a brief rundown to get you ready for Deadpool and Wolverine. And in the future, if you come back for Secret Wars, I will update this video, and hopefully we get just an awesome culmination in Secret Wars and Deadpool Wolverine. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe, tell other people about it, and thanks for joining me on this Marvel history. May God bless your day, and thank you.